The small spacecraft crashed in a wheat field just outside of Kansas City. Black smoke rose from its twisted metal frame as military helicopters circled overhead. Inside the burning wreck, an alien life form struggled to stay alive long enough to deliver his message. Captain James Miller of the U.S. Space Command approached the crash site with his team. Their radiation detectors showed safe levels, but they moved carefully, weapons ready. The dying alien saw them and raised a three-fingered hand. "Please," it said in perfect English, surprising them all. "There isn't much time." The alien's skin was pale blue, and silver blood trickled from a wound in its chest. It called itself Reed, explaining that its universal translator allowed it to speak their language. Captain Miller knelt beside the dying creature, while his team secured the perimeter. "I am a scout from the free worlds," Reed said, his voice growing weaker. "I came to warn Earth. The Galactic Empire. They're coming." He coughed, more silver blood staining his flight suit. Miller leaned closer. "Why are they coming? What do they want?" "They don't want anything. They destroy. That's what they do." Reed's large eyes blinked slowly. "They find civilizations like yours, young, advancing quickly, showing military potential. Then they eliminate them. They call it preventive purification." Within an hour, the site was swarming with officials from every major world power. Reed's vital signs were failing, but he insisted on finishing his message. He gave them coordinates, dozens of them, spread across the solar system. "Hidden caches," he explained. "My people left them centuries ago. Weapons, shields, everything you'll need. We've been preparing for this, seeding technology throughout the galaxy, helping worlds defend themselves." The Chinese general asked, "Why help us? What do you gain?" Reed's laugh turned into a cough. "The Empire destroyed my world. We were too trusting. Didn't fight back soon enough. But we learned. Now we help others. Some of us scatter technology. Others, like me, bring warnings." President Laura Wilson arrived as night fell. Reed was barely conscious, but his eyes brightened when she approached. "Earth's leader," he said, "listen carefully. You have 2 years, maybe 3, before they find you. The catches will help, but your greatest weapon is time. Prepare, unite, and most importantly," he gasped for breath, "most importantly, don't let them know you're ready." "How can we trust this information?" the Russian president demanded. This could be a deception. Reed pulled a crystal from his suit and handed it to Miller. "Proof. Records of other worlds. The Empire's patterns. Everything you need to know." His breathing became more labored. "Your world has something special. Your history. Countless wars, endless conflicts. You understand strategy, adaptation. Use that knowledge." The gathered leaders watched in silence as Reed's life ebbed away. With his last breath, he whispered, "Make them regret underestimating humanity." The world's governments debated for weeks. Many dismissed Reed's warning as a hoax or a delusion. Others argued for immediate public disclosure. But a small group of leaders and military commanders saw the truth in the alien's words and the proof in his crystal. They formed the Earth Defense Initiative, EDI, a secret organization tasked with finding the hidden catches and preparing for the coming storm. Captain Miller was promoted to lead the search teams, while the world's best scientists were quietly recruited to study the alien technology. On the surface, Earth continued as normal. Cities buzzed with life, people went about their daily routines, and space programs continued their modest explorations. But deep beneath the surface, in hidden facilities across the globe, humanity prepared for war. The first cache was found in an asteroid near Mars, then another beneath the Pacific Ocean. Each discovery brought new hope and new challenges. Earth had been given a chance that Reed's people never had. Time to prepare. The Galactic Empire was coming, expecting to find another helpless civilization. They would find something else entirely. Lyra stood before the mirror in her small quarters, watching as her scales shifted from deep blue to purple, then to a soft green. She quickly covered herself with the standard gray uniform that all maintenance workers wore. On her homeworld, being different was worse than being criminal. The Starborn prided themselves on their perfect silver scales that reflected the light of distant stars. For 1,000 years, they had carefully controlled their genetics to maintain what they called purity. But sometimes, nature had other plans. Maintenance Worker 2749. Report to Level 5 immediately, the station's computer announced. Lyra pulled her hood tighter around her face and hurried out into the corridor. Other Starborn moved away as she passed, their silver scales gleaming under the bright lights. Some turned their backs. Others whispered. She had learned to ignore them all. The space station hung in orbit around one of their colony worlds, a massive structure of metal and light that served as a trading hub. Lyra's job was to fix things that broke, clean what was dirty, and stay out of sight as much as possible. It wasn't a bad life, she told herself. At least they hadn't sent her to the genetic correction facilities. "You're late, 2749, her supervisor said as she arrived at Level 5. He didn't use her name. None of them did anymore. "There's a waste processing unit malfunction in Section C. Fix it." Lyra nodded and collected her tools. The smell hit her before she even reached Section C. Something had gone very wrong with the waste processors. As she opened the access panel, she caught her reflection in the metallic surface. A flash of rainbow colors showed where her hood had slipped slightly. She quickly adjusted it. "Look who it is," a voice said behind her. The Rainbow Freak. 3 other maintenance workers stood there, their perfect silver scales marking them as pure Starborn. The speaker was Dale, who never missed a chance to remind Lyra of her place. "I'm just doing my job," Lyra said quietly, focusing on the broken processor. "You know, my mother serves on the Genetic Council," Dale said, moving closer. "She says they're thinking of making genetic correction mandatory for all defects. No more choices about it." Lyra's hands trembled as she worked. Genetic correction wasn't just painful, it changed who you were. Some didn't survive the process. Those who did were never the same. "The process has improved," Dale continued, enjoying her discomfort. "Only a 60% mortality rate now. Better odds than letting mutations spread, right?" The waste processor sparked as Lyra connected the final wire, springing back to life. She packed her tools quickly, trying to leave, but Dale stepped in her way. "You can't run forever, 2749. Sooner or later, they'll come for you. It's for the good of our species." Lyra pushed past them, walking as fast as she could without running. In her quarters, she sat on her small bed, letting her scales shift through their natural rainbow of colors. It was beautiful, she thought, even if no one else could see it. That night, as she lay in bed, Lyra heard the news broadcast from her small terminal. The Genetic Council announces new measures to protect Starborn purity. Mandatory genetic correction programs to begin within the month. She touched her shifting scales gently. There were rumors of places where being different wasn't a crime. Distant worlds where other species lived together despite their differences. Earth was one such place, though the Starborn considered humans primitive and dangerous. Primitive and dangerous was starting to sound better than pure and perfect. Tomorrow would be another day of hiding, of enduring whispers and threats. But as Lyra drifted off to sleep, she began to form a plan. She knew every maintenance shaft, every blind spot in the security systems, and every shuttle's maintenance schedule. She just needed the right moment. And when it came, she would be ready. Lyra's chance came 3 days later, during the night cycle of the space station. She had volunteered for extra maintenance shifts, something no one ever questioned. After all, who would want to spend more time with the defective worker? The maintenance bay was quiet except for the soft hum of machinery. Lyra moved quickly, her tools clicking against her belt as she walked. She had memorized the patrol schedules, knew exactly when the security cameras would turn, and had spent weeks secretly storing emergency supplies in one of the smaller maintenance vessels. The ship she had chosen wasn't much, barely larger than two sleeping quarters put together. But it had something special. A partially upgraded navigation system she had fixed last month. The supervisor hadn't bothered to check her work. No one ever did. As she approached the ship, a noise made her freeze. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. "Hello," a voice called out. "Someone there?" Lyra's heart pounded as she pressed herself against the wall. The footsteps came closer. A security guard walked past the bay's entrance, paused, and then continued on. Lyra waited until she couldn't hear them anymore before moving. Her hand shook as she typed in the maintenance override code. The ship's door opened with a soft hiss. Inside, everything was ready. Food, water, basic medical supplies, and even some spare parts. She started the power-up sequence, keeping the external lights off. The computer chimed. Maintenance Vessel 47 preparing for departure. Please confirm authorization. Authorization code. Maintenance Worker 2749. Scheduled hull inspection. Lyra said, using the fake work order she had created. Authorization accepted. Bay doors opening. That's when the alarm started. Red lights flashed across the maintenance bay. Alert. Unauthorized launch sequence detected. Security teams en route. All personnel remain where you are. Lyra's scales flashed bright colors with fear, but she didn't stop. The ship's engines hummed to life as she pushed the throttle forward. The maintenance bay doors weren't even fully open when she launched. The ship scraped against the opening, sending sparks flying. Behind her, she heard the station's security channels exploding with activity. 2 patrol ships were already launching. Maintenance Vessel 47. Power down immediately. A stern voice commanded over the radio. This is your only warning. Lyra didn't respond. Instead, she aimed the ship toward the nearby asteroid belt. It was considered too dangerous for normal travel, which made it perfect for an escape. The patrol ships were faster, but they were also bigger. Lyra's small maintenance vessel could fit through gaps they couldn't. She dove into the asteroid field, her hand steady now despite the danger. Years of being treated like garbage had taught her one thing: how to stay calm under pressure. A large asteroid tumbled past, missing her ship by meters. The patrol ships fell back, unwilling to risk their expensive vessels. But they didn't give up. They started firing warning shots. One shot hit her engine directly. It wasn't a warning shot at all. No choice now, Lyra muttered. She pushed the damaged engine to full power and aimed for a gap between 2 massive asteroids. The ship groaned, systems flashing red warnings everywhere. She made it through the gap, but the engine was failing. Alerts filled her screen. Critical damage. Emergency landing required. Through the viewport, she saw a blue-green planet. It wasn't on her planned route, but she had no choice now. The ship's computer identified it. Earth, a Level 3 civilization world, considered primitive by Starborn standards. As her ship entered the atmosphere, trailing smoke and debris, Lyra smiled despite her fear. She'd rather crash on a primitive world than live another day being perfect. The last thing she saw before the ship's controls failed completely was a vast green forest rushing up to meet her. 2 weeks had passed since the crash. Lyra sat on a wooden stool in Tom's workshop, watching him work on her ship's damaged engine. Her scales shifted to a curious green as he combined Earth tools with her Starborn technology in ways she'd never imagined. "That won't work," she said, pointing to where he was trying to connect a power cell to an Earth battery. "The energy types are different." "Maybe," Tom replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "But different doesn't always mean incompatible." He made a few adjustments, and suddenly the power cell hummed to life. "See, sometimes you just need to think creatively." A bark interrupted them. Max, Tom's 3-legged dog, hopped into the workshop, carrying a stick. Despite missing a leg, the dog moved with joy and energy that made Lyra smile. Her scales turned a happy shade of pink. "I don't understand," Lyra said, throwing the stick for Max. "On my world, he would have been." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Put down," Tom asked quietly. "Yeah, some people here would think that too. But Max doesn't care that he's got 3 legs instead of 4. He just cares about chasing sticks and getting belly rubs." He patted the dog's head. "Sometimes the best things in life are a little broken." The workshop door opened, and Annie, Tom's elderly neighbor, walked in carrying a basket. "Brought you both some lunch," she said, setting down sandwiches and what she called lemonade. She hadn't even blinked when Tom introduced Lyra as his friend from way out of town. "Those colors are particularly lovely today, dear," Annie said, noticing Lyra's scales shimmer in the sunlight. "Reminds me of the stained glass in my church." Lyra felt her scales warm to a soft orange of happiness. On the space station, people had turned away from her colors. Here, they gave her compliments. Later that afternoon, more neighbors stopped by. Jack, the local farmer, wanted Tom to look at his tractor. He brought fresh vegetables from his garden and stayed to chat. His young daughter, Mary, was fascinated by Lyra's scales and asked innocent questions that made everyone laugh. "Do they change color with your mood?" Mary asked. "Like those rings we got at the school fair?" "Something like that," Lyra answered, letting her scales shift through rainbow colors to the little girl's delight. As the sun began to set, Tom closed up the workshop. "Making good progress," he said, looking at the engine. "Should have you flying again in another week or 2. He paused. "Though you're welcome to stay longer, if you want." Lyra looked around the workshop. In just 2 weeks, she had learned so much about humans. They weren't primitive at all. They just saw the world differently than her people did. They fixed things instead of replacing them. They celebrated differences instead of hiding them. They helped strangers without asking for payment or perfection. "I never knew it could be like this," she said softly. "My whole life, I was taught that imperfection was dangerous, that differences had to be corrected. But here," her scales shifted to thoughtful blue. "Here, we figure everyone's a little different," Tom said, cleaning his tools. "And that's what makes life interesting. Imagine how boring it would be if we were all the same." Max limped over, resting his head on Lyra's knee. She scratched behind his ears, watching his tail wag happily. "You don't even have an official government position," she said. "Yet you help me, feed me, teach me." "That's what communities do," Tom replied simply. "We look out for each other. Different or not, broken or whole, we're all in this together." As the workshop lights dimmed and crickets began their evening song, Lyra realized something important. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a mistake. She felt like she belonged. The warning came from Mary, the farmer's daughter, who burst into the workshop one morning while Lyra and Tom were working on the ship's navigation system. "There's weird lights in the sky," she shouted. "Like silver stars, but in daytime." Lyra's scales turned ash-gray with fear. She knew what those lights meant. "They found me," she whispered. Tom immediately went into action. "Mary, run home. Tell your dad what you saw. Lyra, help me cover your ship." They worked quickly, pulling the camouflage netting over the damaged vessel. Through gaps in the workshop's roof, Lyra could see 3 silver points of light growing larger. Starboard pursuit ships, their hulls gleaming in the morning sun. "They'll scan for engine signatures," Lyra said, her hands shaking as she disconnected power cells. "They'll find me." "Not if we can help it," Tom replied. He grabbed his phone and made several quick calls. Within minutes, vehicles started arriving at the workshop. Jack, the farmer, came first in his truck. "Mary told me." Already called the others. More trucks and cars pulled up, bringing what seemed like half the small community. Annie arrived with her grandson, who worked at the local power plant. Even Pete, who lived miles away, showed up with his old military radio equipment. "What's the plan, Tom?" Jack asked, as everyone gathered in the workshop. "They're looking for engine signatures, right?" Tom asked Lyra, who nodded. "Well then, let's give them plenty to look at." He turned to Annie's grandson. Bill, how many backup generators does the power plant have? 6 big ones, Bill answered. And they're all due for a test run today. He grinned. Pete, get your old ham radio friends to turn on every piece of equipment they've got, Tom continued. Jack, start up every tractor and machine on your farm. Everyone else, spread out. Turn on everything that has an engine. Let's make so much noise they can't find one specific signal. Lyra watched in amazement as the humans quickly organized themselves. Her scales flickered between hope green and fear gray. You would all risk yourselves. For me. Honey, Annie said, patting her hand, we protect our own. The starborn ships were visible now, sleek silver vessels casting shadows over the countryside. Their scanning beams swept the area, searching for the fugitive they'd tracked across space. Inside the workshop, Tom's radio crackled. Power plant generators all running, creating plenty of interference, Bill reported. Got 15 radio operators broadcasting at full power, Pete added. Every tractor and combined for 3 farms running hot, came Jack's voice. More reports came in. The whole community had mobilized, creating a web of engine signatures and power readings that blanketed the area. The starborn scanners would detect dozens of power sources, making it impossible to pinpoint one specific alien engine. Through it all, Tom stayed beside Lyra, watching the ships through the workshop windows. Your people up there, he said quietly. They think being different is dangerous. Lyra nodded, her scales rippling with emotion as she watched the community working together to protect her. Well, Tom continued, looks to me like being different is what makes us strong. Every person out there is different. Different jobs, different lives, different ways of thinking. But look what happens when we work together. The starborn ships circled for hours, their scanning beams sweeping back and forth. But the cacophony of engine signatures and power readings confused their instruments. They couldn't distinguish Lyra's ship from the dozens of Earth machines running at full power. As the sun began to set, the silver ships finally retreated, moving higher into the atmosphere to regroup. They'll be back, Lyra said softly. And we'll be ready, Tom replied. Around them, the community members nodded in agreement. You're not alone anymore, Lyra. Remember that. Her scales settled into a deep, warm purple of belonging. She wasn't just hiding among humans anymore. She had found her people, different, imperfect, and wonderful. The starborn ships returned at dawn, but this time they didn't just circle overhead. 3 silver vessels landed in Jack's largest field, their engines burning perfect circles in the morning frost. From each ship stepped 2 starborn officials, their scales gleaming pure silver in the early light. Tom stood at the front of his workshop, Lyra beside him. Behind them gathered the entire community, farmers, mechanics, teachers, and store owners. They all carried tools of their trades, wrenches, hammers, even Jack's old hunting rifle. That's them, Lyra whispered, her scales shifting between fear gray and anger red. The genetic council members. The lead starborn official stepped forward. His uniform sparkled with decoration, and his voice carried across the field. This is Counselor Reed of the Genetic Purity Council. We have come for the defective specimen designated Worker 2749. Hand her over, and your primitive settlement will not be harmed. Tom stepped forward. Her name is Lyra, he said firmly. And she's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go. The counselor's perfect features showed disgust. You harbor a dangerous genetic deviation. Her very existence threatens the purity of our species. He raised a sleek weapon. This is your final warning. Primitive weapons cannot harm us. Our ship's shields make us invulnerable to your technology. Maybe, Tom replied calmly. But you're standing in Jack's field. And Jack just spent all night flooding the irrigation system. On cue, Jack threw a large electrical switch. The wet ground beneath the starborn officials erupted with sparks as the power plant's generators pumped electricity through the irrigation pipes. The officials' shields flickered and failed, their perfect coordination disrupted. Now, Tom shouted. The community sprang into action. Pete's radio operators broadcast on frequencies that scrambled starborne communications. Bill and his power plant workers created power surges that kept the ship's shields unstable. Farmers drove tractors in patterns that blocked the ships from taking off. This is impossible. Counselor Reed sputtered, his silver scales dulling with shock. You're primitives. Savages. No, Lyra said, stepping forward. Her scales blazed with every color of the rainbow, bright and proud. They're human, and they taught me something you never could. She walked closer to the council members, who backed away from her shifting colors. Perfect doesn't mean better. Different doesn't mean wrong. You dare speak to the council? Another official demanded. You're nothing but a defect. She's our friend, Annie called out. Others joined in, voices rising in support. Look around you, Tom said to the council members. Everyone here is different. We have different jobs, different lives, different ways of thinking. And that's what makes us strong. He gestured at the organized chaos around them, humans working together, each using their unique skills. You see weakness in differences, we see strength. The counselors looked at each other uncertainly. Their perfect coordination was broken, their superior technology neutralized by human ingenuity and cooperation. The council does not negotiate with primitives, Reed announced, but his voice wavered. Then don't negotiate, Lyra said. Just leave, because if you try to take me, you'll have to fight every human here. And trust me, they're a lot stronger than you think. As if to prove her point, Jack's tractors moved closer, their engines growling. Pete's radio interference grew stronger. Bill's power surges made the ship's systems whine in protest. The council members retreated to their ships, trying to maintain their dignity. This isn't over, Reed threatened. Yes, it is, Tom replied. Because if you come back, we'll be ready. And next time, we'll have warned other communities too. How many humans are you willing to fight? The silver ships lifted off awkwardly, their perfect symmetry ruined by mud and water damage. As they disappeared into the morning sky, a cheer went up from the community. Lyra's scales settled into a peaceful blue as Tom put his hand on her shoulder. See, he said with a smile. Being different isn't so bad after all. She looked at the humans around her, dirty, tired, and grinning with triumph. None of them were perfect. All of them were wonderful. No, she agreed. It's actually pretty amazing. 1 month after the confrontation, Lyra stood looking at her fully repaired ship. Tom had finished the last repairs yesterday, combining Earth ingenuity with starborne technology in ways that still amazed her. Her ship wasn't just fixed. It was better than before. Well, Tom said, wiping his hands on a rag, she's ready to fly. The whole community had gathered for what they called a goodbye party, though no one seemed very happy about the goodbye part. Annie had baked 3 different cakes. Jack's daughter, Mary, had made a drawing of Lyra, with her scales done in every crayon color available. As Lyra looked at the faces around her, her scales shifted through soft, warm colors of affection. These humans had become more than friends. They were family. A familiar sound made everyone look up. 3 starborne ships appeared in the sky, but these were different from the council vessels. These were diplomatic ships, their designs more elegant than threatening. Right on time, Tom said, checking his watch. The ships landed gently in the field, the same field where they had fought the council a month ago. But this time, instead of genetic purists, a different group of starborne emerged. Their scales showed slight variations in their silver coloring, something that would have been hidden before. Greetings, Lyra, the lead diplomat said, approaching with a bow. I am Ambassador Vale. After the incident with the council, changes have begun in our society. Your stand here has inspired others. Those of us with subtle differences no longer hide them. Lyra's scales flickered with surprise as the ambassador continued. We would like to offer you a choice. You can return home with full citizenship restored and all rights granted. The genetic correction program has been suspended. Or, she glanced at the humans. You may stay here and serve as our first official ambassador to Earth. The community fell silent, waiting. Tom stepped forward. It's your choice, Lyra. Whatever you decide, you'll always have a home here. Lyra looked at her ship, then at the faces around her. In the past month, she had learned more about acceptance, courage, and real strength than she had in her entire life among the Starborn. If I stay, she said to the ambassador, will we establish proper relations with Earth? That is our hope, Vale replied. Your experience here has shown us that perhaps we were incorrect in our assessment of humans. Their differences make them stronger, not weaker. We have much to learn from them. Then I'm staying, Lyra said firmly. Her scales blazed with every color of the rainbow as she spoke. My place is here, building bridges between our peoples. Besides, she smiled at Tom, someone needs to explain Starborn technology to Earth's best mechanic. The ambassador nodded, looking pleased. We hoped you would say that. We'll begin diplomatic procedures immediately. She turned to Tom. Your community's defense of Lyra has sparked a revolution in our society. More and more Starborn are showing their true colors, literally, in some cases. As the diplomats prepared to leave, Mary ran up to Lyra. Does this mean you're staying forever? She asked hopefully. Yes, Lyra replied, her scales showing happy pink. This is my home now. The diplomatic ships departed, leaving behind official documents recognizing Lyra as the first Starborn ambassador to Earth. The party, which had started as a goodbye celebration, turned into a welcome home festival. Later that evening, as the community celebrated around a bonfire, Tom found Lyra watching the stars. Having any second thoughts? He asked. Lyra's scales shifted to a content blue. No. The Starborn wanted everything to be perfect. But life isn't about being perfect. She looked at the gathering. At Max, the three-legged dog chasing fireflies. At Annie sharing her secret cake recipe with young Mary. At Jack trying to explain tractors to a curious diplomat who had stayed behind. Life is about being yourself, she said softly, and finding people who love you for exactly who you are. Welcome home, Ambassador, Tom said with a smile. Above them, the stars twinkled, and Lyra's scales shimmered with all the colors of happiness. She had finally found where she belonged, among the wonderfully imperfect humans who had taught her the true meaning of acceptance.